So there's a new Sims killer on the market. It's called Inzoi.
Oh my gosh!
It's an AI-based life simulator game already being called a serious challenger to The Sims.
Yes, we did it! Oh, it's a cool scene.
The life simulator Inzoi has taken the internet by storm.
It has everything going for it to stand as a real contender.
Inzoi, early access starts later this year, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Mostly pointless, barely functional, or both.
A soulless imitation of the worst parts of The Sims.
It's so soulless that almost every logo or graphic in the game is AI generated.
I left the experience feeling a bit underwhelmed.
Inzoi is indeed developing a multiplayer aspect to the game.
What the hell is going on? Krafton's life simulation game had all the makings of a smash hit. Stunning visuals, amazing character creation, an army of passionate life sim players, and a mega corporation with a seemingly endless budget to boot. But ever since this game burst onto the scene 8 months ago, it has all but fallen off the face of the earth. Inzoi is currently averaging less than 1,000 concurrent players at any given moment, and despite the developer releasing several updates including a DLC, the game simply isn't gaining any momentum. For a game that costs tens of millions of dollars to develop, in a genre that's known for passionate fans who are willing to sink hundreds or thousands of hours into their games, Inzoi's floppage is extremely troubling for Krafton. So my question is, can anything be done to save Inzoi? Inzoi's development began back in 2023 when Hyungjun Kim, or K-Jun as he's known,
Game director Hyungjung Kim
approached Krafton with the idea of creating a life simulation game. At the time, Krafton was spending money like crazy. Just 2 years prior, Krafton had its IPO and it raised nearly $4 billion US.
Firm raised deposits of around $4.35 billion US.
And with all the investment it got from going public, the company began diversifying heavily. See, up until this point, Krafton was pretty much only known for one single game, and that is PUBG. That game is pretty much just a battle royale shooter game. It's actually pretty fun. I used to go with my coworkers after work and play until like 3 a.m. at the PC bong. But when Krafton went public, they realized that they had to branch out in order to sustain themselves and achieve long-term growth. Especially now, as a public company, they couldn't just rely on one single game for their success. That would be way too risky. So Krafton went on this massive spending spree. They started buying up a bunch of studios such as Unknown Worlds, which is famous for creating Subnautica, as well as a variety of others like Neon Giant and Dreammotion. In addition to purchasing a bunch of pre-existing studios that already had a history of established franchises, Krafton also wanted to create some IP of its own. And this is where K-Jun comes in. He has over 2 decades of experience in video games, almost all of which is in MMOs. But in interviews, he discussed his fondness for games like The Sims, a game he used to play together with his son. So he pitched the idea to Krafton to create this next generation life simulation game. And Krafton, of course, likely seeing the amazing financial success of The Sims, saw dollar signs, and thus Inzoi was born. Keep in mind that this was all happening just after Krafton received that massive influx of investment from its IPO. They were ready and eager to invest heavily in new projects. Immediately, Krafton began building a massive team to develop Inzoi. And unlike the pre-existing third-party studios it had purchased, Inzoi Studio would be working in-house, directly under Krafton's own roof. Development began in early 2023, and it released in early access just 2 years later on March 28, 2025. I can't stress enough how wild this timeline is. To develop a game enough that it's ready for an early access release in 2 years is unheard of, especially within the life sim genre where games are notoriously difficult to make. But I guess it speaks of how much a priority Inzoi was for Krafton. They clearly spent a lot of money on this game's development. And one of the reasons they were able to create Inzoi so quickly was that it actually was created using Unreal Engine 5. Unlike games like The Sims, which has its own proprietary engine, with Inzoi they're using Unreal Engine 5, so they already have the tools at their disposal. Even down to things like the Inzoi character models, which are reconfigurations of the Unreal metahumans.
Metahumans may only be a few years old, but we are seeing them everywhere. powering everything from games and AI agents.
They didn't necessarily create a lot from scratch for Inzoi. When it came to parts of the game that they had to create themselves, they used technology like motion capture to create animations, and they even did 3D scans of cities and objects.
정말 이걸 다 3D 스캔을 떠온 거예요. 의상도 실제로 마찬가지고 의상도 실제로 코디분이 의상을 갖다 세팅해 주시고 이제 맞춤해 주시고 이제 그걸 갖다 저희가 스캔 떠서 다 받는 거예요.
So all of these methods, while more expensive, allowed Inzoi to be developed rapidly. Of course, there's also Inzoi's use of generative AI, which is well known and I think kind of infamous at this point. The strange thing is the Inzoi team has wavered between proudly showing off their use of Gen AI.
Our AI-first approach simplifies and streamlines various development decisions and processes. We're also increasingly relying on AI for decision-making,
to completely ignoring questions about it. I think backlash from live sim players really contributed to that change in tone. To give you one example of how problematic this Gen AI situation was with Inzoi, early in the game's development, they claimed they only used copyright-free assets from a model they developed. But when they did like a week-long playtest and users had access to the character creation, people dug into the files and found that Inzoi was actually using a stable diffusion model.
Because Krafton themselves say that the AI is trained off company-owned assets and that their dataset is based off a custom model. This is a lie.
Stable Diffusion is a product of Stability AI, which coincidentally EA just partnered with. But this model is kind of notorious for being trained on copyrighted works. So during that week-long playtest where people had access to the character creator, fans were generating textures that resembled copyrighted work. It was a complete mess. Furthermore, it's kind of widely accepted that a lot of the music in the game was created using generative AI. Even things like the signs you see around the cities and many of the textures used in objects can all be attributed to Gen AI. All of this is to say the use of Gen AI is another factor in Inzoi's rapid development. But despite all of this, to go from I have an idea for a game to let's start making this game to we're ready for early access launch in 2 years, you can ask anyone who works in game development, that concept is insane. And for myself, looking back to when Inzoi was first announced, I remember thinking it came out of nowhere. It was really like suddenly I opened up YouTube and there were a bunch of Sims creators playing this brand new life sim. It took a lot of people by surprise, and to give you a better timeline, development began early 2023, and that first round of playtest where we had influencers playing this game was in November 2023. That's less than a year.
That's why we built Inzoi in just 8 months and launched it.
What? Needless to say, those 2 years the game spent in development showed. I have to give the Inzoi marketing team credit because the way they used influencers to promote the game and put Inzoi on the map was really smart. They did 3 rounds of playtest total, and all of the influencers playing the game online really got a lot of people talking, and many people liked what they saw. It really added to the hype. The first round of playtest happened November 2023. Around 10 months later, there was the second round in August 2024, and then finally in March 2025, just a few weeks before early access launch, was the third round of playtests. So by the time that early access launch rolled around, the hype was palpable. I was seeing comments from people saying that they bought brand new gaming PCs in order to play this game. There were all those comments and videos calling Inzoi the Sims killer and saying the Sims is over. It really felt like the Sims community was waiting with bated breath for Inzoi, their life sim savior. And I really think a big reason that people were so hopeful for Inzoi was that there are a lot of Sims players who are rightfully so fed up with EA and The Sims 4. They're tired of the broken, overpriced, lackluster DLC. So people really just wanted a new life sim game to play, and yes, I believe some people were betting on Inzoi more so out of hate for The Sims 4 rather than love for Inzoi. But still, The Sims finally had some competition. Inzoi released on March 28th, 2025. It sold 1 million copies in its first week, and then it disappeared into the abyss. To put it simply, Inzoi flopped hard. critical reviews were damn near atrocious. And by the way, I saw so many people around the time that the critics' reviews were coming out saying that EA paid off the reviewers. I think that's bullshit. I do not believe that for a second. If anything, inZOI paid off influencers to overhype their fucking game. You don't need to come up with conspiracies when the money trail is already there, right in front of you. At release, the player count peaked at 80,000 concurrent players, and then within days, it quickly plummeted. People bought this game thinking it was going to be this amazing new The Sims but prettier experience, but they played it for just a few hours and then never touched it again. So what the hell happened? Now, just to go ahead and address the inZOI stands who were already typing angrily in the comments, yes, we know the game is in early access, and yes, we also know The Sims 4 isn't any better. But let's rewind for a second. I mentioned the marketing earlier and how they did such a good job at marketing inZOI. I also believe that the marketing was a double-edged sword. The millions upon millions of dollars Krafton pumped into marketing this game was both beneficial and extremely detrimental. On one hand, it got a lot of people excited and ready to whip out their credit cards to buy the early access copy. But on the other hand, all the marketing and hype brought people to a game that was nowhere near complete. I would argue that the game was 20% done at early access launch. By Krafton's own admission, which we're privy to thanks to a lawsuit, a Krafton executive said that compared to the company's other early access releases, inZOI had far less content and less gameplay and was way less developed. Krafton knew that the game was not ready for early access. So why did they spend so much money to bring players to a game that wasn't even ready? Not even close to being ready. The early access argument is out the window because the state that this game launched in was not even up to early access standards. I think there's a couple reasons why they released it when they did. First, I think Krafton was eager to recoup some of the tens of millions of dollars they've spent on this game's development. And secondly, I do believe that they've done their market research on the Sims community, and they knew that a lot of live sim players were used to getting unfinished, half-baked products, as we've seen with the Sims 4's launch and all of the DLC they've released for that game. So maybe they just thought these people will put up with it. And a lot of them did, which brings me to another important thing to note in regards to inZOI's marketing.
Now, there's gameplay online from a select few of content creators who got early builds of the game to play around in.
And this is that the majority of the pre-early access playtests were sponsored. So when people were watching their favorite content creator playing inZOI and having so much fun playing it, those creators were in Krafton's pocket all along.
This video is sponsored, but I will be doing a lot of other inZOI videos over the next couple weeks, and I will still mark them as paid partnerships.
And I know some of these creators were saying things like, I'm sponsored, but I'm still being honest with you guys. Just to give you some behind the scenes of getting sponsored as a content creator, taking a sponsorship means you have to show the product in a positive light. No game company or company period is going to pay someone to say negative things about their product or game. Why the hell would they do that? And I'm saying this as someone who has done sponsorships before. A lot of the times, sponsors have to approve your video before it's even posted. And yes, they will ask you to remove anything that's too negative about that game or product before you publish it. I've had it happen to me. Even neutral statements I've made about a product, they ask me to change it to something more positive. So yeah, these content creators could go on about how they're still being completely honest with you, even though they're getting a check from the company. But that is not the truth. And if I were you, I would absolutely side-eye any content creator who's trying to convince you otherwise. I'm not implying that these sponsored creators were lying to any of their viewers, but they were also not fully honest, because you can't be when you're getting sponsored. There's a contract involved with multiple pages, non-disparagement clauses, all of that. What I'm saying is, it was very smart of Krafton to use trusted and well-respected influencers to do a lot of the marketing for inZOI, but this approach was also a big part of the reason why so many people were disappointed with the game. They saw their favorite Sims influencer having so much fun playing inZOI. Meanwhile, these influencers were cashing checks and getting gifted $3,000 to $4,000 gaming PCs by Krafton.
They did send me a gaming PC.
When actual players finally got their hands on the game, they realized, well, damn, This game isn't as fun as my favorite YouTuber made it look. And to the Sims players watching right now, some of that might sound familiar. I know it has been for me. I used to watch my favorite Sims YouTuber review the latest, greatest Sims DLC, and they made it look so fun and amazing. But whenever I was influenced by them and went out and bought it myself and played it, it was nowhere near as good as they made it out to be. As a matter of fact, in a lot of cases, it was the complete opposite. The hype that these influencers cultivated for this game was not grounded in reality. It was grounded in them getting their bag. I think now's a good time to be clear about my relationship with Inzoi from a content creator perspective. I don't know how many of you know this, but I was contacted by the Inzoi team back in February 2024. Here's the receipts on the screen. Emails I received from the community manager who was a Krafton employee. I think my first video on the game was in November 2023, right after that first round of playtest, and I was very critical. So I was totally lost when I got this email. They invited me to a private influencers Discord for Inzoi.
Okay.
And again, at first I was like, I don't even know why they're inviting me. I haven't said anything positive about this game. But they also said in the email that if I joined the server, I could ask any questions directly to the community manager. And I thought that might be helpful just to learn more about the game and to share it with you guys. Just to be clear, there were no financial benefits. There was no free shit. I was not in a creator program. It was just a random server with like 50 or 100 other influencers. I know like James Turner was in there. I don't know who else. He's the only one I remember. Just like a bunch of random influencers, big and small. So I was in that server for about a month, and then I asked a question. Again, this is well documented. I've talked about it before. Here's the screenshots. The question was essentially my polite way of asking why they hadn't coded same-sex marriage into the game yet, because at the time, it was only possible for straight couples in the game to get married. And as someone who clearly has my finger on the pulse of the life sim community, I know how many LGBTQ Sims players there are.
43% of our audience identify as members of the LGBTQIA+ community.
And by the way, it was later confirmed that it had not been coded into the game.
However, now jumping into the game, I've created 2 female Zois who are roommates, so they are not related or not dating. And I kind of built up their friendship, and then I built up their romance, and we were able to get to the point of a lot of like romantic interactions. And then I never got the option to have the Zois marry. Not good that this is not included in the game at this point, and I guess all eyes will be on them to include it for the next version of the game.
So I was right to be skeptical about that and to ask that question because it clearly wasn't a priority for them. But the weird part is, as soon as I asked this, they removed me from that server. I was not banned from the Discord, it was just the influencer server where they removed my role or whatever, just for asking a question about gay marriage. And I only asked twice. Once in the influencer server and nobody answered, so I waited a week, and then I asked again in the public section, which is where this developer responded. What's bizarre about all of this is I'm pretty sure it was this developer, who is a lead producer on Inzoi, who removed me from that server. I don't know for a fact, but I do know that I was removed within about 10 minutes of him responding to me. So it was either the developer or the community manager who invited me, because I do not believe the mods had the power to remove influencers from that server. The whole situation was very weird and sketchy.
So be cool. Don't be all like uncool. Why?
Okay.
I never had any negative interactions with anybody in that server, the public one or the private one. I barely said anything. I know it might come across as like, oh, his YouTuber ego was hurt, but it was really about the fact that they were acting so weird about this topic. After that first round of playtest, there were people all over the internet asking why same-sex marriage didn't appear to be possible in those playtests.
They're being very indirect with the marriage thing, and it's a little bit icky. Like, I wish they'd just say it straight.
I wonder why my other characters couldn't get married in my other game.
It made it seem like LGBTQ gameplay was an afterthought to the developers. And then when I asked a question that was controversial or that they didn't like, they punished me for it. But yeah, it was a weird experience. I don't know what else to say. The truth is, I didn't belong there in the first place. I'm not a video game influencer. I make content about video games, but I do not work with game companies. I don't promote video games. I constantly get offers to do video game sponsorships, and I turn down every single one of them because that is not what I do on this channel. The reason I'm telling you all of this is because some people believe I'm only critical of this game because of that negative experience. I was critical of the game before all of that even happened. Now, thankfully, when it comes to the same-sex marriage issue, it was fixed by early access release. However, the Inzoi team made this huge mistake where they forgot to program LGBTQ NPCs into the game, and that was a real turnoff for a lot of people.
We went around to every man in this damn city, and shocker, they was all straight.
So whether it's the marriage thing or the gay NPCs bug, all this shows that maybe the Inzoi team doesn't really understand what the life sim player base values. Switching gears though, there's also been a lot of discussion about Inzoi's player count. I think the Inzoi team even addressed this at one point, saying something along the lines of, this is a single player game, so we're not worried about the active player count. I even saw a comment recently where someone said the Inzoi team only cares about the sales, not the player count. I'm sorry, but that doesn't make any damn sense. Sales and player count go hand in hand. If people aren't buying your game, they're not playing it. And if people buy the game and enjoy it, it will be reflected in the player count. If 1 million people bought your game like they did with Inzoi and no one's playing it, that is a huge problem. Video games are not a one and done experience. When a consumer purchases your game, they expect to get several hours of enjoyment out of it. And if players can't get their money's worth out of your game, then you failed as a developer. Period. You failed at making an enjoyable game. And that is what's happened with Inzoi. So I find this statement from the Inzoi team to be extremely stupid, especially when it comes to a life simulation game, which is all about long-term gameplay. This is a genre where people invest hundreds of hours into creating stories and playing generations of families. People should be playing your game regularly. If players are not sinking hours upon hours into a life sim, which is reflected in that active player count, then your game is a flop, and Inzoi is that. So taking a step back, is Inzoi completely cooked? Is there any hope for this game at all? In a previous video, I revisited Inzoi for the first time since playing it at launch, and I found that it was still suffering from some of the same problems it had at launch. For example, one of the most important aspects of a life simulation game for me is the characters. I'm a huge fan of The Sims 2 and 3, and a big part of the reason I love those games is because the character gameplay is so incredible. As players, we want to tell stories and sometimes live vicariously through the characters we create. And in order to do that, the character gameplay needs to be solid. The characters need to have distinct, fully realized personalities, traits, and quirks that make them unique and interesting to play with. Inzoi does not have that. I can't find any discernible difference between Zois with different personality traits. They all act exactly the same. So my question is, if I'm a developer for a life simulation game, and if I've actually studied this genre, how can you not prioritize the personalities of the characters? How have they not fleshed out this very basic component of a life simulation game? And why is that not their priority? For some reason, the Inzoi team has been more focused on adding new cosmetics to the game rather than expanding and improving upon core features that are severely lacking. And if things couldn't get any worse, according to a recent interview, the Inzoi team is now working on adding multiplayer to the game.
We never officially announced it, but I think because of that day and probably this podcast, the news has started to leak out a bit. Inzoi is indeed developing a multiplayer aspect to the game.
What the hell's going on?
It's getting weird.
And the gameplay itself just is not fun. There's no real gameplay loop. There's no real challenge. There's simply nothing about the game that entices players to come back, let alone sink hundreds of hours into it. The fans are typing, "It's early access," angrily in the comments. But this is a game made by an $11 billion company with a massive team behind it. And instead of making sure that the base game and its core features are solid, they invested resources into making a DLC that nobody asked for. They're implementing multiplayer. They keep updating the game with meaningless add-ons, and they're using early access funds to send a bunch of gifts to influencers. Are the priorities in the room with us? Truly. If you guys haven't watched this recent interview with K-Jun, he said in the interview that the Inzoi team uses AI to make important decisions about the game.
Even just our studio is actively using AI. Our company Crafton emphasizes AI first and is pushing it. In our team's case, where we use AI a lot is when we take input from the public. We ask AI to gain an understanding of the public perception. We're also increasingly relying on AI for decision making.
You done lost your damn mind.
This is embarrassing. Something is severely amiss. I don't know if it's the leadership. I don't know if it's the team is too big and they're not like focused on what's important. I'm not sure. It's not really my problem to diagnose this. And I know it upsets people that I'm not giving enough sympathy to this game. I tend to not give sympathy to multi-billion-dollar corporations. This game is not Paralives. This is not an indie studio. This is not a team of 10, 15 people. I hold Inzoi to a way higher standard than I hold Paralives. It's a game by a massive corporation with a team of nearly 100 people and a whole AI department and a marketing department at their disposal. And they're over here like, new update guys, we added Halloween costumes. Trick or treat, give me a good game to eat. Give me characters with personalities, some grit, some challenge, a fun game. It's frustrating to see a game that has so much potential flop this hard. For those of you who don't know, I love this game RimWorld. It's a colony simulation game with a lot of life sim elements. I've been playing it a lot recently, and the truth is, I feel more connected to these little characters, and they have way more personality and flaws and complexity and backstory and more interesting relationships than any character I've ever come across in Inzoi. I don't know if anyone else saw this interview with K-Jun, the producer and director of Inzoi, where he talked about his vision for the game's future. In the interview, he kinda implied that there's a conflict between Crafton higher-ups and the Inzoi team when it comes to the timeline for the game's official launch. It appears that Crafton is pushing for an official release as soon as possible, but K-Jun is planning to stay in early access for a few more years to come. To me, the fact that Crafton and the Inzoi team are not on the same page is a red flag. Crafton obviously wants the official launch to come as soon as possible because it means they can stop sinking so much money into the game. After launch, they can lay off a bunch of staff and spend less on marketing. But if the game continues in early access for several years, it means they're operating at full capacity, and that is very expensive. The reason this concerns me is that Crafton as a publisher is well known for abandoning games that don't perform well. They've even shut down a few games that were in early access. This is a public company with shareholders to answer to, and while they're massively successful, again, largely due to PUBG's continued success, they don't have unlimited resources, or more importantly, unlimited patience for seeing projects through, especially when it comes to projects like Inzoi, which are incredibly expensive and haven't picked up steam even after tens of millions of dollars have been spent. Another consideration is that lawsuit I mentioned earlier. I plan to make a whole video about this because I'm kind of obsessed with the lawsuit, but Crafton is in the middle of this massive lawsuit that could potentially cost them hundreds of millions of dollars if they lose. And as rich as Crafton is, a $200 or $300 million bill is not something many corporations can just pay on a whim. So I fear that if Crafton doesn't settle and ends up losing this lawsuit, which by the way is not looking good for them, recently the judge called Crafton's argument frustrating and bewildering. So if they lose this, it could have disastrous effects on some of Crafton's projects like Inzoi, because it simply means that they'll have less money to spend. The question still remains, can the game even be salvaged? Again, as with everything I say, this is just my personal opinion, but I've come to the realization that the foundation of this game, much like The Sims 4, appears to be inherently flawed. The things that should be a priority for Inzoi are not priorities for some reason. Those fundaments that comprise a life simulation game have been overlooked and ignored throughout the game's development, and still to this day. If you want to make pretty characters and play a glorified dollhouse simulator, Inzoi is great for you. However, if you're someone who's looking for something deeper to create complex storylines with plot twists and characters that you can really get attached to, I don't think Inzoi will ever be the game for you. And that's a tough pill for some people to swallow. Sometimes I go on the Inzoi subreddit and I often see the same kind of posts. And it's where the Inzoi fans are trying really hard to convince themselves and everyone else that the game is better than it actually is. I have to laugh. One user made this post where they wrote, The new update is so amazing, guys. And then when someone asked what the new update was, they said, oh, it added some new poses. Poses? Really? Is that how low our standards are? I'm convinced the 900 people playing this game right now are just playing dress up and taking screenshots. That is not a life simulation game. That's a glorified screenshot simulator. So my question for you is there anything inZOI can do that will make you interested in playing it? Because for me, unless there's a major overhaul to the foundation of this game, inZOI's not going anywhere. I'm sorry. I don't find joy in saying that. It's just the harsh reality of how I see things. I don't necessarily think the game is going to be abandoned anytime soon, but my prediction is that it's just going to fizzle out. Now, hopefully that process doesn't take as long as The Sims 4 has taken to fizzle out, because I don't think any of us have the patience for that right now.
Do it like that.